Kenya, from Colombia, and from Ghana. And we want to turn our attention to a topic that sits at the heart of effective and equitable policy making. And this session basically highlights practical experiences from the three countries in building inclusive data systems that inform policy with a focus on gender equality and social inclusion. Through their presentations, we are going to explore how tools such as the Women's Economic Empowerment Index, the time use surveys, and unpaid care data are being integrated into national systems to shape decision making. Our aim for having this session today is to showcase the value of inclusive data and encourage its adoption and adaptation across countries as we advance evidence-based policy making. So now we want to turn our attention to Kenya for a deeper dive into its practical experience. It's my pleasure to welcome Katra to present on Kenya's methodologies and findings in integrating the Women Economic Empowerment Index. So Katra will tell us more about who she is, and then she'll walk us through the Kenyan approach. So I welcome you to her session. Thank you, Katra. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam. Good evening. My name is Katra Dahir. I work with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and the Research and Development Division. I majorly do poverty and inequality analysis, among other statistics. So my presentation will be an overview of the Women Economic Empowerment Index in Kenya. Sorry. How is it supposed to work? Okay. Thank you. So this is the outline of my presentation. So I'll be defining what women empowerment is, the data source that we used, the survey questionnaire, the conceptual framework that we adopted, the factor analysis, the weighting and the thresholds that we used, the dimensions of the women economic empowerment, and a decomposition of the indicators that we had selected. So generally, women empowerment, before I go to Women Economic Empowerment Index, what is women empowerment? So it's the broader, all multidimensional concept encompassing a woman's full ability to gain the confidence, strength, and opportunities to make decisions, exercise their rights, and control their lives in various spheres. It includes, and not limited to, political, that is participating in governance and policy; social, that is the freedom from gender-based violence, access to education, health, among others; cultural or personal, that is the bodily autonomy, self-confidence, and agency, among others; legally, them have under the law or access to justice; and economic, this is what we are going to focus on. That is the financial independence, productive resources, decent work, among other indicators. So what is women economic empowerment? So it's a subset of the women empowerment, because you can have economic empowerment, social empowerment, political empowerment. So for us, we defined it as a specific subset focused solely on economic dimensions. So it is defined as the process of increasing women's economic participation particularly their ability to earn, save, own, invest, them allowing them to make decisions and take actions that affect their economic status. Some of the key elements that we had looked at was access to paid employment and decent work for women, control over income and assets, access to financial services, among others. So the data sources that we were doing a survey in 2022 called the Kenya Continuous Household Survey. In it, we had incorporated a module on women economic empowerment. So we had a questionnaire on women empowerment. Then we adopted the cross-sectional design covering all the 47 counties in Kenya. We had a total of 1,000 households, and we used the stratified two-stage sampling design. Then from each household, we selected randomly 2 eligible women. That is, we were looking at women aged 18 years and above, using the case grid to ensure representativeness. Then we had a good response rate of, out of the 15,000, out of the 20,000 households selected, we had 14,589 eligible women who successfully responded to the interview. So these were some of the questionnaires that were in that module. We had 6 modules, and the core was labor and consumption, because we were looking at economic empowerment. And the others included digital engagement, access to financial services, asset ownership, safety in public spaces, social and political engagement, family and intimate partner dynamics, and psychological well-being. In the conceptualization, we adopted the Nile Kabia's theoretical framework for measuring the women empowerment. And this framework consists of the following 3 interrelated components. So we have resources, which looks at the precondition. Then we had the agency, which is the process. Finally, the outcome, which is the achievements. So this is how we categorized our dimensions. For us to settle on the 6 domains, we used the exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis to identify the patterns in the data. Then in the exploratory factor analysis, it was majorly to identify indicators and domains of empowerment. Then the confirmatory was to validate those domains. Then we ended up having 6 key domains, which confirmed a strong correlation between the indicators. Then this is just a definition of how we domesticated the Kabias to the Kenyan context. So I'll not go through it much. It's just the definitions. Then coming to the dimensions that we settled on, we had 6 main ones. That is engagement in economic activities, that includes employment. The second one is access to financial services. Among them being financial inclusion, that do these women have access to maybe bank loans to empower them, maybe start a business or something, the mobile money accounts ownership, asset ownership is the other domain, like do they own assets like land, house, livestock, among others. Then you have household expenditure, decision making, do they have the right to make decisions in their households, control over the sexual relations, and psychological well-being, this being the autonomy, among others. Then we did the weighting and the aggregation of these indicators. Not all indicators had equal contributions, so we allocated them equal weights across the 6 domains. Then we did normalization of the indicators to ensure comparability. Then a woman was considered, she met 80% of the criteria. So our threshold was 80%. If she met 80% of the required indicators, then we considered her empowered. This was a decomposition of, so for this index, we did analysis both for women in union and empowerment in union, we could see 2 indicators were leading that in women, that is psychological well-being and access to digital technology. This applied also for women not in union. And the one that was the lowest for enabling a woman to be empowered was having separate savings or financial assets. For women in union, same as well. Women not in union, this was one of the major findings. It showed that psychological well-being and digital technology accessibility is the one that showed, it was one that was leading in showing that women are empowered in Kenya. So the major findings, using the 80% criteria threshold, it showed that Kenya had 36.3% women empowered from the indicators that I had shown you before. But if we reduce the threshold to 70%, you'd notice empowerment will decrease, obviously. Sorry. This is what I'm talking. So with 80% of the weighted indicators, it showed 36.3% of women in Kenya are empowered. And if we reduce the threshold to 6%, the empowerment increases to about 68%. So this was the major findings, translating to about 4.9 million of women in 2022 in Kenya that were empowered. Looking at the segregation by rural-urban, we'd see like women in urban areas are more empowered compared to women in rural areas by 41.5% and 33.6%. Obviously, women in urban areas be having more access to resources compared to the ones in the rural. Then by age, we'd see women aged 35 to 59 were more empowered compared to women at a younger age of 18 and 24. So the leading is women aged 25 to 34 and 35 to 59, showing older women are more empowered compared to the young. By education level, obviously, when a woman is more educated, she'll probably be more empowered compared to the ones which have no education. So with the 80% threshold, we can see that women with more education or above secondary are more empowered. Then by marital status, you can see women who are married are more empowered compared to the women not in married. This could be attributed to the benefit of dual maybe household decision, income and a shared decision making. You'd see as they go to lowest in women that are never married. Looking at women in monogamous marriage are more empowered compared to women in polygamous marriage. Majorly, this can be drawn by sharing of resources in polygamy and limited access, limited decision-making power or potential discrimination within the polygamous union. Looking at the highest wealth quintile here, women empowerment by wealth status, women who are wealthier are more empowered, by the wealth quintiles. We have women at the highest quintile being more empowered compared to the women at the lowest quintile. And as they become wealthier, they become more empowered since they have more access to resources. By county, that is Kenya, we would see the western side of Kenya is more empowered compared to the other side, majorly due to agriculture. I think is the most activity in Kenya. So majorly you would notice going to Mandera, Wajir, Garissa, mostly the dry areas or the ASAL areas, they're less empowered. That's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Kacha. Before you sit down, growing up in Kenya, women, like my mother, was not able to access a loan unless my father, her husband, approved it. And even right now in Kenya, you find that women with disability or persons with disabilities are highly marginalized when it comes to land inheritance. So just in 1 minute, could you just expound on how inclusive data systems such as the Kenya Women's Economic Empowerment Index can help make invisible inequalities visible and drive evidence-based policy making? Just 1 minute.
How inclusive data systems such as the Kenya Women Economic Empowerment will help in the evidence making. I would so the Women Economic Empowerment Index, majorly it demonstrates how inclusive data system can cover dimensions on inequalities that are often overlooked by the traditional statistics. So while conventional statistics indicators may show whether women are employed or are earning income, the Women Economic Empowerment goes further. By measuring the women economic empowerment in different indicators. For example, the one for Kenya, we use the access to financial services, ownership of assets, decision-making, control of their sexual relation, and the psychological well-being. So this dimension helps us understand not only whether women participate in the economy, but also whether they have the power or resources to benefit from this participation. So I'll say inclusive data system ensures that policies are informed by evidence rather than assumptions, enabling the government to allocate resources more effectively and monitor progress towards gender equality and inclusive decisions.
So another round of claps for Katra for the nice presentation. Actually, for me, special claps because as she was presenting the Kenyan map, the part where she was saying the green part is where most of the empowered women come from. I'm happy because it's true. I'm a living example because I come from that green side. So now we want to move. Thank you so much, Katra. You can have your seat. We shall engage later. So I would want to now continue building up on the Kenyan context, and I want to bring in another important perspective. It is my pleasure to welcome Kannabel from the UN Women. So Kannabel, could you share how UN Women support the generation and translation of time use survey evidence into concrete policy outcomes in Kenya, particularly the national care policy? Welcome.
Okay, good afternoon. Yes, my name is Oganga Kannabel. I work for UN Women as a program specialist, gender statistics advisor. Previously also I worked for the National Statistics Office. So just to begin with, saying that UN Women has been a thought leader and a go-to institution when it comes to supporting the national actors on advancing the gender agenda within the country, particularly through the production and use of gender statistics. And so based on this, probably I may just give that journey in terms of when this discussion around the need to have evidence to generate the national care policy started. And this was way back in 2016 when the State Department for Gender Affairs, in collaboration with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, determined that there was need to have a national care policy in the country, because back then there was a lot of fragmented efforts from various actors, trying to estimate, time use patterns, both particularly in the within the informal urban settlements and all that. So in a way, Kenya's context was slightly different, that already the gender machinery had identified that there was need to have a national care policy in place before even the data was collected. And so this is now where UN Women came in to fill in the gap, to guide, the state actors throughout the process. And so it was important then to establish a national institutional coordination framework where there was mapping of various actors based on their roles that they would play throughout that journey. So one, like for the National Statistics Office, they were responsible for producing the evidence, both collecting data on the time use survey and also undertaking analysis of the unpaid domestic and care work, so that we would be able to value and determine the value of the contribution of unpaid domestic and care work to the national economy, so that it will also be meaningful to determine what is the relevance in terms of comparing the role of the care economy in supporting the national economy. And then, of course, we also had the State Department for Gender Affairs, whose critical role was in terms of advancing policy advocacy efforts and also helping to build the capacity of stakeholders both at the national level and also at the county level. Then, of course, we also had UN Women, whose role was critical in terms of providing that technical support to national partners across both at the national level and also at the county level. And then we also had the University of Nairobi, the academia, whose role was critical when it came to doing complementary qualitative analysis in terms of determining what are the drivers of unpaid domestic and care work within the country. So the reason I'm saying this is that this was really significant because every actor was then able to know what role they were going to play, and so there was no duplication of efforts. And after that, then there was that formation of the National Coordination Framework where we had the Technical Working Committee. So in that committee, then we had both subcommittees where we had those whose focus was on generating the evidence, those whose focus was on building capacity, and also leading the advocacy efforts and resource mobilization. So then it is through that particular process that UN Women then supported the NSO to be able to collect the time use statistics. And I remember during that time, the imagination, that you can be able to quantify how people spend their time from when they wake up in the morning to the end of the day was something that was not easy to comprehend. And so it took a lot of efforts even for the NSO to get to appreciate that this can be measured by looking at some of the regional, partners or countries that had been able to undertake some of the time use surveys, to learn from their experience on some of the shortcomings they went through and all that to collect this data. So the data was collected in 2021, and UN Women still supported the NSO in terms of analyzing this data and doing the further analysis and all that. Most importantly was the implementation of the National Care Needs Assessment, because this was, in addition to the evidence from the time use survey, critical in determining what was the current supply of care services within the country, what was the demand of care services in the country, and also matching the supply and use. So we were able to support the NSO alongside with the gender machinery to be able to estimate using an ILO and also UN Women policy tool on estimating care deficits, investment costs, and also the economic returns. And this was critical because then when it came to now guiding the policy discussions at the national level, it was very easy to look at it from a macroeconomic perspective level by saying that if the government was to invest, to the tune of 24 billion Kenya shillings in terms of establishing the care supporting infrastructure and also capacity building and all that, then the return on investment would, in terms of revenue collection, would then go to the tune of 54 billion Kenya shillings. And so this was quite critical in shaping the discussions. Addition to that also was when it comes to now aligning the policy framework process. After we had the evidence, then it was very important that then we are able to ensure that the need to have a national care policy is aligned within the national policy frameworks. And so we were able to work closely with the gender machinery. This is the State Department for Gender Affairs and Affirmative Action, along with KNBS, to ensure that then the care work was integrated within the National Development Plan as a national priority. And so then this is then what triggered, after it was now incorporated in the National Development Plan, it now triggered the process of now going forward with using now the evidence from the National Care Needs Assessment, through which you were able to then identify the care policy roadmap and also the evidence-based policy recommendations, which then importantly just to say is that based on the experiences of other countries like Mexico, we had Canada and all that, it was important that then the policy development process was aligned within the 5R framework, where we had the first R on the recognition. Do we have the data so that we can be able to determine what are the challenges, what are the issues, within the care sector? And then we also had the issue around the redistribution. So around issues around the norms, engaging both at the national and sub-national level, the actors, to get to appreciate that it's very important that we shift our norms to get to appreciate that care responsibility is not an issue around the work that women should be predisposed to undertaking. And just to remind you that in the study I mentioned that the University of Nairobi did, from their qualitative analysis, they were able to identify that being a female was a predisposing factor for one to be able to find themselves having a lot of responsibilities in taking care of the unpaid domestic and care work. And so after we did that, then when you look at now the other R on redistribution, so once you've been able to engage with the national actors, the male champions and all that, to get to have the shifting of the norms within the community, then you achieve the redistribution. And then after the redistribution, you now go to look at the first 3 R's were now to focus on the unpaid domestic and care work. But then we wanted to have a policy that was all-encompassing, where you have both the paid work and unpaid work taken care of. So in the paid work aspect, there was that need to look at, for those who are already in the paid sector, like the health sector, the education sector and all that, these people need to be adequately remunerated, equal work for pay and all that. And also the issues around the voice agency, for them to be able to have proper representation to share their issues and ensure that their grievances are well taken care of. So it is through that particular approach or framework that then we were able to structure, support the gender machinery and the NSO to lead other actors to ensure that then the national care policy was structured to address all the aspects of the care economy. And so, of course, once the national care policy, was developed, of course, there was that lots of consultation between the national actors, both the relevant, state agencies, like when you look at within the care sector, you have the Ministry of Health, looking at within the existing policies that they had, what are some of the gaps that were within those policies that are already existing, that then the national care policy would come to address in as much as issues around care concerned. And then we also have, of course, the Ministry of Education. So in the country, the education policy takes care of the age of 4 years and above. So then what about this age of 0 to 3 years? How are they going to be taken care of? And so that is again the other segment that then the national care policy was coming again to be able to address. And of course, without forgetting also at the domestic level, where we have the paid domestic workers, where we were able to ensure that, again, in looking at the issues around the Convention C-189, on how the issues around the domestic workers would be addressed. So it is through that particular journey that I think coming all the way to now in last year, in almost at the end of the year in the 4th quarter, that now the government was, able to get to appreciate and have this national care policy, implemented, approved and now commissioned as a policy for the country. But then, as I conclude, just to mention that as this process was already going on, remember I spoke about the 5 R's framework. So already as the policy process, development process was going on, the National Statistics Office did not only stop at producing the time use survey data. Again, we were able to work along in supporting the NSO along with the Statistics Finland, Statistics Sweden, to ensure that then how eventually you are going to be able to estimate and establish that what is the value of the unpaid domestic and care work to the national economy. And so way back in 2022, we had a delegation that went to Mexico, who have been very successful in doing this. And just to mention that in Mexico, they have been able to integrate within their judicial system the data that is generated from the time you survey has been simulated in such a way that if, for instance, a marriage was to be dissolved, then a woman who has all along in her years of that marriage been working in supporting the family with doing those responsibilities on unpaid domestic and care work would not just walk out of that marriage with empty hand. So they're able to estimate the lifetime of the marriage, and in terms of also the number of hours they've been spending, and based on the basic minimum pay, they're able to establish that this is the equivalent of the value of the contribution of this woman. And so this is one of the things that we really needed to use to be able to ensure that once the policy has been put in place, so how do we advance the advocacy efforts to ensure there's resource mobilization to be able to ensure that this sector is well resourced, so that some of those gaps that were there before the policy was put in place can be taken care of. And just to say that last year we were able to publish the report where we found that only after the agriculture, forestry, and fishing sector in the country, the second was, in this case, would have been the unpaid domestic and care work, whose value was 23.1%. compared to the contribution of other sectors to the GDP in the country. And so this then helps to advance policy engagements to see that indeed unpaid domestic care and care work is important for the holistic functioning of the economy. So I'd like to stop at that point, and back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give him a round of clap. Yeah. So thank you so much, Kannabel. When you are speaking, I liked the words budgeting, resource allocation, national development plan. When in Kenya, policy is almost the tool that you use to receive money so that you're able to implement the documents. So we like when we hear policies have passed because it means finances are going to follow. And also he's talked about partnerships and collaboration. Throughout this whole data festival, we've been talking about partnerships and collaborations and how, as the UN Women, they were able to partner with all these people. The only part we'll come back to is this issue where he talked about the marriage and calculating after divorce. That's an interesting one. I think we shall revisit that one. So now I want to go now to Colombia, and I want to invite Camilo. Camilo is from Colombia. He's going to tell us more about himself and also give us the country context on how Colombia is using the inclusive data tools. So welcome, Camilo. And can we have his presentation up, please? So, yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Rose, very much. Thank you, Rose, very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I would like to thank for the invitation. I know we were expecting Andrea Ramirez to be here. Andrea is the deputy director, and of course, I'm not her. But on her behalf, I would like to extend our gratitude for the invitation, and also on behalf of our director, Piedad Urdinola, who couldn't be here too. So today, I would like to show you some key elements of our national time use survey. But before doing that, I would like to give you some context on the national care system that we have in Colombia. So to start, this national care system was created recently in 2025 by our policy document 4143 in Colombia. Policy documents are called COMPES. So this document created the national care system and gave all of the institutions of the national level very specific responsibilities. For example, for our case, we have been working on the survey since 2010. But since this COMPES, we started having more responsibilities and more specifications about the details of the survey and the information we should cover. So the system itself is a set of policy services and actions aimed at recognizing and redistributing the burden of care between men and women. And with that, we want to recognize care as a ground for our societies. In that sense, we look to protect it and to make sure that it can be done in a very well way between all men and women. And with that document, we also look to align with the Law 2294 of the National Development Plan, which includes a specific axis for social transformation and establishes the creation of the national care system across the country. And also, before getting to the survey itself, I would like to highlight another tool we have in Colombia, and it's the map of the system for national care. So this map was created with support of our Ministry of Equality and Equity, also with ECLAC and UN Women in Colombia. And the idea here was to start mapping where the public services for care were located. Here we have all of the establishments that give this care of this public service of care in the national and also the subnational levels. So here we created this map using almost 13,000 administrative records, and it gives information about 31 departments. Departments are like the first level subnational division in Colombia. And then also we have the municipal coverage, because we have the departments, and then in the second level of the subnational division we have municipalities. And with this, we wanted to create a tool that can provide effective information for the territorial decision-making regarding care. Okay? So now, on the survey itself, there in Colombia, we used to measure the participation of the population over 10 years old in unpaid work, paid work, and personal activities. So this operation was created in 2010, as I mentioned, and the operation has a national coverage, including municipal capitals and populated centers, dispersed rural areas, and approximately a sample of 70,000 households. So we measured two things mainly with the survey. The first one is the participation rate, which shows how are men and women participating in each of the care activities, but also we measure the average time that each participant is dedicating to those activities. So as I mentioned, we have the three categories. The first one, the work activities included in our system of national accounts. Then we have the personal activities and the work that is not included in the national, in the system of national accounts, which is mainly the unpaid work. So the latest results were published yesterday or the day before. So I would like to show you some of the main results that we found with this recent operation. So here we have the daily participation in paid and unpaid work activities, disaggregated by sex, and it just gives us like the gross idea of what's going on and what has been the evolution since our last survey. So, for example, we have that for the period from 2024 and 2025, women are participating with 34.2% in paid work, while men participate with 55.9%. So what we see here is that the participation of women in paid work has not recovered from the pandemic period. We are almost close to getting to the previous number or what it was before the pandemic, but we are still not there. And also what we see when we go to the unpaid work is that men are participating a little bit more into those activities, but it doesn't represent that women are participating more in the paid work, which would be like the obvious conclusion, but in this case, it's not. And here we have the results by hours dedicated by both men and women, comparing the different periods of time. And what we see is that men have more participation now in the paid work, while women also have increased that number, but not in the same ratio as men. So men participate now 11 minutes more in the paid work, while women 8 minutes more in the, Here is the unpaid work. So these 8 minutes correspond to the time dedicated to unpaid work by men. So men have increased their participation in both paid and unpaid work, but paid work represents like a bigger percentage. And here we have the participation of men and women in the activities included in the unpaid work on the third category that I showed. And what we see here is that men usually participate in the activities of care that are more visible. And we see that there is a lack of participation of men when we go to see the care for other people. Because here is important to mention that our care policy has like a 3-dimension understanding of care. The first one is to get care, the second one to receive care, and the third one is the right of caregivers to receive care. So that's where we see that men are lacking a little bit more when we talk about how they participate in the care of other people. And well, and the main conclusion here is that also men are participating increasingly in many of the activities, but that increase is not rapid enough. And here we have the results of what I just showed you, but the participation with time. Here we show how much time does men and women dedicate to each of the activities that we measure in the survey. And we compare all of the periods. So I won't go through the details of each one of the activities, but what we see is that women keep playing a key role in all of the activities, and they are having a more prominent role in the paid work, while men keep having that role in paid work, and their participation in unpaid work is increasing, but at a very slow rate. So that would be it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Camilo. I liked, as you were presenting, I was just looking at some of the similarities between what Kannabel talked about on the roles of the implementers, the partnerships, and I'm happy that UN Women was also involved in the survey that you did. So lastly, we want to welcome our last speaker from Ghana. Her name is Gloria. She's also going to tell us the context of Ghana and how they've used this adapted to the data tools.
The head of program planning at the internal and external cooperation unit. I also do the gender aspect of the work in the service as well. It's a pleasure to join this discussion in advancing inclusive data and systems. Okay, I would like to begin with a simple observation in that we see that people who are invisible in data often become invisible in policy as well, if you will agree with me. So with this principle has guided some of our work in the service in a bid to strengthen inclusive data statistics. So like many countries, we've recognized that traditional data systems do not always adequately capture the realities of women and like persons with disabilities, vulnerable populations, informal workers, and unpaid caregivers. So as a result of this, we've made some deliberate efforts to strengthen the production and use of inclusive data to ensure that some of our development decisions are informed by the experience of the people. Yeah. So for Ghana, I would like to share our experience using 4 key areas. The first one being strengthening gender statistics. So at the Ghana Statistical Service, we have worked consistently to mainstream gender across official statistics. And this includes the improving the production of sex disaggregated data, strengthening gender indicators for the SDGs monitoring, and also supporting the ministries, departments, and agencies that we collaborate and work with. And also promote the use of gender statistics in the national planning policy, national planning processes. So one lesson that we've learned is that policymakers respond more effectively when inequalities are supported by evidence rather than assumptions. This morning, we had a session at the Parliament of Kenya. We were there, and one of the MPs made a statement that for they, as politicians, they use assumptions than data. So it's up to us as statistics officers, statisticians, to produce the required data to give it to them to serve as evidence base for them to use in their day-to-day activities, in their localities, in their constituencies. So it's very key for us to be able to convince them with credible data, because I was a little bit alarmed when he says politicians are used, they base the evidence based on assumptions, and I found it a little bit worrying. So it's up to us to, show them that no, data really exists, and we can't afford to allow them to use these perceptions. So I would say that the data helps us move discussions from perception to action. So it's very key. And secondly, I would like to dwell on making the invisible visible through unpaid care work. This is one of Ghana's strongest examples in inclusive data. Though our time use is an old one, we had our very first time use in 2009. Then recently, we've done some analysis using our past Ghana Living Standard Measurement Service from 3-4 rounds. The current one is round 8. So we've combined it with the 2009 one and made some assumptions as far as our time use is concerned. So as I would put it, historically, activities such as childcare, cooking, cleaning, caring for the elderly persons, fetching water, firewood, has been largely been invisible in official statistics, despite their enormous contribution to household welfare and national development. So some of these things have been missing. So through the time use surveys and with subsequent analysis that I made mention that we use the GLSS data, that is the existing sources of data from the GLSS, we have generated some evidence on the scale and distribution of unpaid care work. We have the report. It's yet to be released. We worked with UK on this, so it will be released very soon. And the findings clearly show that women carry a disproportionate share of unpaid work responsibilities. And this evidence go a long way to help elevate uncared pay work from being viewed as a merely household responsibility to being a developmental issue, also a gender equity issue and an economic issue as well. So today's discussion around women's economic empowerment, also social protection, child care services, and all that, recognize the role of unpaid care work and how it plays, the part it plays in shaping the opportunities and outcomes. So for us, this demonstrates the power of inclusive data. And once an issue is measured, it becomes visible. And once it becomes visible, it enters policy for discussions as well. And thirdly, I would like to talk a little bit about our citizen data experiences. This is another important innovation that Ghana has been has entered into the citizen data approach. The Ghana Statistical Service implemented citizen data initiatives on issues on gender-based violence and solid waste management, and recently we did that with persons living with disability. We have in the district assemblies, there's a percentage of a common fund that is supposed to be allocated to these people, and somewhere 2 years ago, we engaged with them, and using the citizen data approach, we wanted to find out how accessible this 3% common funds is accessible to them for their needs, for those who want to go into vocation, education, and all that. So this is another approach that we use to engage them, for them to also be visible in the data. And I must say the results of this citizen data initiative with the persons living with disabilities has yielded results in that the common fund, which was about 3%, has now been increased for them to have more access to resources. The government appreciated the work with it and has increased their allocation of funds for these persons living with disability. So the citizen data also helps to complement official statistics. It provides additional perspectives and strengthens the participation in the data ecosystem. And most importantly, it ensures that the voices which have been otherwise have been missed will all be included in the national conversations. And I'll also like to talk a little bit on partnerships. Our experience has shown that inclusive data systems cannot be built by national statistical offices alone. Partnerships have been critical to our successes. We've worked closely with organizations, some organizations such as we work a lot with the Danish Corporation, Statistics Norway, and also as a gender focal person, I also belong to the Gender Data Network, a group that brings together the gender experts to share ideas on what they are doing in their various organizations. And these partnerships have gone a long way to also improve the system. And so these partnerships, I must say, have strengthened the data production, analysis, dissemination, and policy uptake, as well as peer-to-peer sharing of experiences. So if I should say it, how has the gender-sensitive data shaped the policy priorities? The real value of data lies not in collecting, but in using it. In our case, gender data is increasingly informing discussions around women empowerment, child care services, social protection programs, energy access initiative, gender responsive planning and budgeting, and all issues that has got to do with gender. So the data is helping policymakers in identifying where inequalities exist and where interventions are most needed as well. So as we continue to strengthen our inclusive data systems, we are learning the evidence that evidence is most powerful when it informs action. So I would like to conclude with 3 lessons from Ghana's experience that I would say first, we get what gets measured gets prioritized. Secondly, I would say inclusive data does not happen by accident. It requires a deliberate effort and intentional design. And thirdly, I would say data must move beyond reports and influence decisions. So I would like to say in conclusion that Ghana's experience demonstrates that inclusive data systems is not just simply about collecting more data. They're about making the people more visible in the data space. Thank you. And when people become visible in the data, it's like everything, there's a clear path, and they become also visible in the policies that are initiated. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Let's appreciate her. Yeah, so like in the discussions, please get your questions ready. We shall be taking a round of questions to our panelists. I like what Gloria has talked about and given a very good example how data actually impacted and brought about budget increase. And I hope also in Kenya, our officers will continue to collect data and inform our politicians so that they stop assuming and actually use they actually use data. I also like the issue of citizen data because it actually bridges the gap between the government and marginalized communities. So I'm happy Ghana is doing that. And I'm aware also Kenya, the NSO is very keen on that. So I just want to ask my panelists one question before we go to the audience. And it's a very simple one. I'll start with you. You've talked about the Women Economic Empowerment Index. We have partners here. We have countries from representation from different countries. What is the one thing they should copy directly? And what is the one thing they must customize to their own local context? And the same question will be for Kannabel in relation to the time use survey. One thing that they can copy directly and one thing that they can customize to their local context.
Thank you, madam. One thing I would suggest countries to copy directly is a multidimensional approach in measuring the women economic empowerment and majorly not focusing just on income or employment. One thing they must customize to their own local contexts. Economic empowerment is not only about the income or employment. Like the Kenyan Women Economic Empowerment, we recognize that empowerment involves different dimensions, like I'd mentioned the 6 domains. So the broader framework majorly provides a more complete picture of the women's realities and can be applied across many countries. However, indicators themselves, they should be customized to the local reality of each country. So each country has different social norms, economic structures, policy priorities. So if asset ownership is important maybe to Kenya, it might be different for another country. So countries should maintain the overall framework, but adapt indicators and thresholds to reflect their national context. So I would say the key lesson from Kenya is that while the methodologies can be shared, local ownership is essential for producing data that policymakers can trust and use for different countries, depending on what they're interested in. Yeah, thank you.
Same question to Kannabel on time use survey.
I would have wished you allowed me to give more than one. I don't know if you mind, but it's okay. I think one of the most important things that countries would also need to look at that we have observed over the years is that gender financing is becoming a problem as the years are going by. They are shifting donor priorities, and when it comes to funding some of these gender-based surveys, it becomes very difficult because once the priority has shifted, you find there are no resources channeled in supporting gender-based surveys and all that for us to have the requisite evidence, before policies are developed. So one of the things I think we've attempted to do in Kenya is to integrate gender-based surveys within the national surveys. And this is the same approach we used when we did the national time use survey. And again, also the other surveys, we have the second time use survey that is currently going on, which has been integrated within the integrated labor force survey. So that is very important in terms of leveraging on resources, because when you look at a fully fledged standalone time use survey, the amount of resources you need is to the tune of $600,000 at least, which becomes a problem. But then through the integration within the existing national surveys, we were able to spend a little amount, or a not so much substantial amount, to be able to undertake the survey. So that would really help to frequently generate the necessary evidence that we need to shape the policy discussions, just like my colleague here has mentioned, that politicians will be using assumptions. So that brings me to also the other aspect of advocacy efforts, because from the experience of Kenya, I think one of the most important things that I saw worked out well is to have national coordination mechanism. And this should be led by the gender machinery so that all actors can be brought together, and this can really help to reduce on duplication of efforts and also help to have, that cross-pollination, to be able to set priorities right together and be able to bring all the relevant development partners, to work together in supporting the national actors. And then lastly, I hope you would agree to my request, is when it comes to the aspect of when you look at the issue you queried me around the estimation of the value of unpaid domestic and care work. I think in most of the occasions, I really participated, in terms of building the capacity of the national stakeholders and also at the county level. And from the experience we saw is that when you narrow the discussion around the micro aspect of it, shifting the norms, ensuring women, can also have time to engage in other activities and all that, you'll find there's a lot of pushback, because you'll find also the men saying that, but we are also providing for the family, so why should the women feel that they're bearing the entire responsibility? But when you approach it from a macroeconomic perspective, in terms of now when you engage with the policy makers, particularly in this case like the National Treasury, because for every policy, they have to look at what amount of resources will be required to implement this policy, and what is the return on investment. So this really helps to make the discussions to be more meaningful, because then they would be able to see the evidence that this is the contribution of the unpaid domestic and care work to the national economy. And then using the policy tool I mentioned, when you inject this amount of resources, then the potential revenue, because remember also the fiscal space is also shrinking because of the external shocks and all that within the country. And so you'd find government at the moment is mostly focused on looking for resources, generating revenue. So when you tailor your engagements in terms of ensuring that for this amount of investment in the care sector or in the care economy, then the potential revenue that will come out of it would be this significant, then that also helps to really facilitate the policy engagements that eventually we saw now the national care policy coming to fruition. And just to mention that it is the first national care policy in Africa. It's only Cape Verde that have a national care plan that they have developed. And so as I conclude, is to say that from that experience, I think Kenya has been within this region been determined as a regional leader, because we've had peer-to-peer exchange with Nigeria in helping them to analyze their time use survey. They have also had the same peer-to-peer exchange with South Africa, who did their time use survey way ahead of Kenya. But then now, how to translate the indicators that my colleague here was presenting into now a policy was really like an experience that most countries have never had. And so having ex-ante gender assessments also will be important, because then you also have experts, not only the quantitative analysis, but also from the qualitative approach. You also have experts in the sector speaking to some of the issues that are there, giving their opinion on how best to deal with some of the issues, and then now in a holistic approach, then you are able to come up with key policy action areas that then are implementable. Thank you.
So thank you for that elaborative answer, and I'm happy to hear that Kenya is the first one to come up with the national care policy and the return on investment as one of the strategies you used in lobbying for funding. So lastly, I just want to come back to Gloria and Camilo. My question is more that we are having two perspectives. You're from two different continents, and we're just interested to know, in measuring areas like unpaid care work or social inclusion, which often involve sensitive or non-traditional data, what was the biggest challenge you faced, whether methodological or cultural, and how did you overcome it? So I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I can think of a very big challenge in the methodological aspect, and is a challenge, but it's also our main priority as of right now, and it's the disaggregation of the information we produce, or of the level of disaggregation we can provide. Because as of right now, the survey produces the information disaggregated by regions. So as I told you, in Colombia we have departments, we have municipalities, but regions is like this broader conjunct of departments. So it's a very broad way to present information, and what we want to do there is to start working with this experimental statistics with smaller estimations in order to provide the information at the department level and the municipal level, because what we want to do as the big horizon of this is to provide usable information for the decision making at the local level, because we know like the main difference can be seen between the rural and urban areas, or maybe between different departments with different levels of development, and that's what we want to make visible, especially because women throughout our country live very different realities. So that's what we want to show. And that's our main methodological challenge. But also, when you mentioned the cultural challenge, I always think about this policy we have, and the policy would like to include all kinds of care activities, all forms of it, including traditional forms of giving care, of getting care, and this also poses a challenge for us, because as statistical offices, we tend to use these very standardized categories. So, well, I've shown you the categories, and we see that we could have some challenges while integrating these traditional activities into these categories. So that's what the cultural challenge is to have a very comprehensive read of all of the activities implied in the care. And also, I can think of another one. It's that we currently we are measuring care by the percentage of participation in the activities and the hours dedicated to care, but also we have to start thinking, how can we measure the quality of care? Because it's well known, for example, in Colombia, men and women give different kind of care and dedicate. That's why we try to make visible with the time, but we want to make sure, like, for example, when doing the house chores, it's like the easier example I can think of, women would be more dedicated to have them done in a certain way, while men wouldn't normally. So that represents that women have to do it like sometimes twice. Yes, have to do it, and if not, have to do it well because men couldn't do it. So that's what we want also to include in our measurements, is the quality of how the activities are being done.
Thank you for that. I like the last part you've talked about, the quality of care. I don't know, men, you've heard what they've said. Women, we are better at doing things. I think that was the statement, or maybe I just had my own things. So, yeah. So, same question to Gloria.
Thank you. The fact that unpaid care work is not recognized as work in some of our contexts, so it becomes a little bit difficult when it comes to measuring it. And this tends to create methodological and cultural challenges. So from the methodological perspective, many of these unpaid care work, they become easily overlooked because and underreported, because they are viewed as part of everyday life rather than productive work. So it makes it a little bit difficult when you enter that space. And from a cultural perspective and social norms, this, women often lead these kind of cultural discussions, and the women themselves tend to view these activities as something which is normal. So simply as family responsibilities, as their tasks as women to go about it, they don't see it as kind of work. But So we miss the economic aspect of this unpaid care work with this kind of mentality. So as a result, the true scale of the unpaid care work doesn't get to be measured. And addressing these challenges, we had to go back into the methodologies, how to go about it, also with stakeholder engagement to see how various perspectives from our stakeholders to make inputs into it to give us insights on how we can improve and even conquer this kind of mentality. And again, stakeholder means with partnerships and all that. And we also work closely with organizations working on gender and social inclusion. And I would also say that in our encounter with our citizen data approaches, especially with the first pilot that we did, we had a challenge in that when we deployed the app, we did an application. When we deployed it, we didn't notice that people were just using the app to test if the system really works or just to see how it works. And they were not truly giving us the true reports that we needed, in addition to real reports. So at the end of the data collection period, we realized that there were true responses and ones that were just a trial of the app. So in our next subsequent, then the next stage of the pilot that we did, this time around, we made provision for reporting true submission and testing reports in the app. So at the end of the day, we were able to, decipher which is the real report and which one was the just to test the system. So from our first experience, whereby we just deployed the app without taking into cognizance the fact that people might just be playing pranks or just using the app. Based on that, we were able to improve on our second approach, and we had good results. So our experiences has taught us that measuring the invisible is often the first step and towards changing the perceptions and influencing the policy that also we use to guide ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can appreciate our panelists. So I want to open the floor. We have a few minutes remaining. We started late, so if there is any one or two burning questions, we have a mic around. Someone who wants to engage any of the panelists, from Katra to Kannabel. Yes.
Okay, I would like to engage the presenter from Colombia. I was really disturbed by your statistics, where men, either paid or unpaid, are few. No, I can say they are few. But women in paid, there are no men in the paid, they are more, and ladies are less. But in unpaid, women are more and men are few. Where are these men? Where are they? What are they doing? Is it not creating a room for abuse? You know, when these women go and fend, they come and they are beaten, they are abused. So what is this challenge that these men are facing, so that now you can come up with an intervention, a strategy for them to be encouraged also to do that women are doing? Yes, women, we can do everything if we are given the opportunity. In fact, we want to challenge the 1/3 rule to be half-half. To be half-half. That is my policy. You will read my book next year. And I've said half-half policy. We are more than men. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for the intervention. I think you have a very clear diagnosis of what the situation is. And what we are also seeing is that in Colombia, women are participating more in the paid activities, but that doesn't represent that they are participating less in the unpaid activities, which bring us to the conclusion that women are having this very extensive double journey. This is what we call that they work 8 hours in an office and then go home to continue working at home with the chores. And also it's very interesting for policy making, because we, with this kind of studies or this kind of surveys, we want to also create a notion of what people are doing. Yes, it's what you are saying. And in Colombia, we have this category of we call them ninis. Like it's like neither. They're not in work, they are not in education, and they're not in other activities. And this category is being very sometimes we're having a lot of discussions around this category, because this category often makes the unpaid work invisible, because sometimes when we cannot measure that kind of activities, they are included in that category. So it doesn't represent the reality of men and women in the country. So I think that that complements very well the diagnosis you just made. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I like the discussion, but then I wanted to add that when you look at the total workload, the paid work and plus unpaid work, you still find women tend to work more than men. And what does that result in? Time poverty. Remember the issue of work-life balance and that social well-being. So it's very important to ensure that as much as because of the social norms that we have and all that, men do not tend to consider or have, because of the gender biases, consider that these responsibilities on unpaid domestic and care work is supposed to be done by women. But then that's now where the gender advocates need to come into the space and also work with some of the male champions to get to appreciate that. And sometimes it's a structural problem, because you will see even in the advertisements, when probably something like a dishwasher or even a laundry machine is being advertised, then you see it's a woman who is advertising it. So there's a lot of structural, change that needs to be done, so that some of these responsibilities are known, that it is not per se from that young age, when children are growing up, to be already predisposed that there are these duties that are supposed to be done by women vis-a-vis those that should be done by men. And of course, when you look at the paid work, indeed it is true. In as much as women also do paid work, but you'll find on average, men do much of the paid work than women. And this is the reason as why we are trying to say that we would then want to ensure that when we redistribute the unpaid work, then women can have more time in their hands to also begin to be engaged in more productive activities like employment, education, being in the political space, and all that. Thank you.
We can take one more question. Anyone who has a question or a reflection to the panelists? If not, I want to appreciate my panelists, but is there? There's one? Okay.
Thank you for the very interesting discussion. Because you're all from statistics offices or supporting statistics office, I'm keen to know which countries in the world have the best, should I say, the best approaches to measuring unpaid care work, women economic empowerment, or who do you go to when you're looking for best practices? I had Mexico's mentioned, but I'm keen to hear which other countries are your go-to. Thank you.
Anyone?
Firstly, I must say that the UNECA has a handbook on producing time use statistics. So that is the first point of call. But recently, most countries have done a lot of work in time use. Kenya, I've just learned that my Colombian friend has also. So all these countries exist. There is no true, or I would say there's no perfect, or that is I don't know how to put it, but system that you can say that this is the perfect one. It's a continuous, process. A country will do it, then you realize something new has come up, then you can tap into it and integrate it into your system to make it even much better. So from my perspective, I wouldn't say there's one country that we can look up to say that this model is perfect. And also, we are different across countries and across culture. We have our different cultural values and differentiations in our setups. So that's something that I would like to see.
Okay, thank you. I think I would start with what you were mentioning. We are in different contexts, different continents, but also would like to highlight two experiences. The first one, we also, besides the survey, we also worked on the national time transfer accounts. And with that, what we want to do is to make visible what could have been or what could be the economical value of the unpaid work. We want to see how much does it represent to in our gross product, internal product, to our GDP. And we are doing that because we started with the national transfer account that we all know, and we took that from Korea because they were pioneers in that. And because of them, Colombia, we took the risk to be the pioneers with the time transfer accounts. So that would be one example I would like to highlight. And the second one is my colleagues in here, from what I'm hearing, because we are also working with citizen data. But our main conclusion is that some of the countries here in Africa are a lot more advanced into the integration of citizen data into official statistics, because that's the horizon we have as of right now, but we are still learning, we're still working on the products we need to have to be there. So I think the experiences, for example, from Ghana and from Kenya can be very valuable for us into this stage. So that would be my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for that question. I think for me, where I sit, I would say that one of the countries you can benchmark with in terms of the analysis or the generation of time use statistics, I would say, other than the UNSD guide on producing time use statistics, the revised one in 2024, you can benchmark with Kenya. The reason I'm saying this is that, remember, Kenya has been able to collect the time use statistics, share their experience, and support Nigeria to publish their report in the whole spectrum of analysis and all that. And then also they have been able also to provide support to Mozambique. And so the most important thing, I think, for African countries that when it comes to how to collect the time use statistics is learning from the experience of other countries. It's very important before you begin to collect the data. Because like also in our case, when Kenya was about to collect the time use statistics, we had to hear from the experience of Tanzania, experience of Uganda, and believe you me, it was an interesting one. Because like in Uganda, there are two approaches to collecting time use statistics. You can either use a prospective diary or a retrospective diary. So a prospective diary is where you drop the diary with the respondents, and then they're able to fill out the information on their own, then you'll collect later on. But interestingly, before we decided on which approach to use, we heard from Uganda that they did a pilot and they had a 98% non-response rate. So 98% of the the interviews were done, 98% of them failed because of issues of literacy and all that. And so then that already was a learning curve for us, a lesson to learn that the best way to use was the retrospective approach. Then also when you go to the UNSD guide, when you look at the issues around the time interval, the way you would segment your diary so that you're able to, in a sequential manner, ask the activities that are done. The important also document to make reference to is the International Classification of Time Use Statistics, because it then gives all the activities in a granular level in terms of how they are categorized, so that as the data is being collected, there is no activity that is missed out within that spectrum. And of course, the issues around the time interval that you'll give within the diary, there is, of course, they recommend that anything above 30 minutes would begin to affect the respondents with issues around memory, begin to, get to, forget in terms of the activities that they were doing. So anything below 30 minutes, that is what is mostly recommended. And then lastly, the ILO, of course, noted the gap in terms of the capacity of various countries to be able to ensure that there is high frequency data in terms of availability of time use statistics. And just like I mentioned, that it's very expensive and also logistically very complicated to undertake a standalone time use survey, particularly when you are integrating it within another standalone survey, because then the focus, when you're implementing a time use survey, complicates the survey, the main survey of interest. Because when you're doing a time use survey, you have to segment the days of the week to ensure that when the interviews are going to be done, which households will be visited on, the first day of the week, the second day to the end, and also remembering that the other main survey also is to be done. So what they did is that they came up with a light diary time use survey. And so this has really enabled the ease of collecting data, particularly on the paid and unpaid work, which now then helps to ensure that the issues around what my sister here was saying, they need to have data to now update the household satellite account or valuation of unpaid domestic and care work, then now becomes easier. And I think that is the route that now Kenya has also been able to pick. So other than that, of course, we have Statistics Finland, we have Statistics Sweden, also Norway, in addition to Mexico. Of course, we have Canada, we have also America, who have also been really able to do a number of time use survey. And like he had said, you'll find various continents, the approach they use tend to vary depending on the methodology and the cost implications and all that. So each of the technique or approach that is used has got the strengths and weaknesses. So it's up to the NSO to choose in terms of how granular and the level of quality of the data that they would want to collect depending on whichever methodology. Thanks.
I have a follow-up question. Sorry, Kannabel. You sparked another idea in my mind. As we compare ourselves with other countries, the context is so different. So for the continent of Africa, for example, and Asia, care work is mostly done by nannies because we can afford, it's affordable. If you go to Europe, the care work is so expensive and not done by, those caregivers or the nannies. So I just wonder how we make that comparison when contextually it is so different. Even the level of effort to do care work here and the level of effort to do care work there are so different just because of development and how much modernization there is. So how do we reconcile all that and have an accurate number? You just sparked an idea in my mind, that's why I had to come back.
Okay. What I'd like to say is that when you look at the 19th conference of the International Conference of Labor Statisticians, unpaid work was considered as productive work. It is part of work. And so the issues around how the data is collected has not changed world over. So is the tool that you are using, for instance, if you choose to use the classification standard, the ICATUS that I was mentioning about, it disaggregates all the activities to the very granular level so that as the respondent speaks, they're able to tell you what activity did they do. But now in terms of what you're bringing is now the policy angle. Because you'll also find even for us in Kenya, it is an issue of lack of proper enforcement. Because if you look at the basic minimum pay, what it indicates in the law vis-a-vis what the nannies are paid in the informal sector, and this is one of the things that now the National Care Policy would want to be able to remedy, so that the care work is considered as work. How? Proper remuneration, proper reward, and also for these workers or caregivers, also to be able to have a voice agency, like representation. When they have their issues, how do they ensure that their grievances with their employers and all that are taken care of? So the issue of the measurement, I think, based on the UNSD guideline, is standard. Is only now from country to country when it comes to now the enforcement or the regulation that now that becomes an issue. And I think that is now where for Kenya we are heading to, because based on your question, the National Care Needs Assessment that we did, we looked at if a caregiver who is looking after up to 7 children, providing care services for them, if they would be paid something that is commensurate to the value of the work that they are doing, and also looking at also comparing to other sectors of the economy on how people are paid, that was around 27,000 Kenya shillings. But how many people do pay that? Because even if the government was to come with a law and say that this is the basic minimum threshold that they should be paid, but if enforcement is not adequately done, then that becomes a problem. And that's why you'll find in the developed countries, it has now become equally expensive, just as the work that myself would be doing in an informal kind of sector. And so that then has had to have households to redistribute on how they share those responsibilities. So you'll find, for instance, that you'd have to agree with your spouse that for this particular season, I'll be working, you'll be looking after the children, then subsequently, again, not to lose on my career progression, again, my spouse will have to look after the children as I also go to work. So at the end of the day, the issues around the redistribution and the recognition of care work being work is achieved. Yes. Thank you.
Wow, that's deep. So thank you so much. I don't want to take any more of your time. One burning one? Okay.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Kipkirwak Philemon. My question goes to the Colombian panelist. I'm asking, during time of crisis, how do you address methodological gaps between the inflows and displacements that happen and how does that affect labor force or women when measuring labor? I am asking, how do you address methodological gaps when collecting data during times of crisis, like when we have displacements and inflows, and how does that affect the labor force, or when collecting data on women or workforce pertaining women?
Okay, thank you for the question. And here I would like to say that, as I showed in the presentation, our sample is not very big. So we have many troubles when accessing certain areas and going through certain emergencies, for example, or crises, as you were saying. But because of that, I think it's what I was saying in the previous answer, is we want to go, or to be able to produce more detailed or more disaggregated information about the different units, territorial units. And I think that for that, experimental statistics such as the small area estimation could give us a very valuable input on how to address those situations.
Thank you so much, Camilo, for that. I think we're done with the questions, and I would want us to wind up here. Seeing that Kannabel already spoke with a lot of passion as our brand ambassador on unpaid care work, and I would want to have one call of action from Gloria. One sentence. What is your call of action to the participants who are here today, our audience? Same to you, Camilo and Katra. So I'll start with Gloria.
Since we are talking about inclusive data here, I would say one message that I would like to give out is we should always start by identifying whoever is missing from your data. Is very important, because inclusive data begins with when we intentionally seek out for the populations that are traditionally not taken care of and they are overlooked. So it's very important to identify whoever is missing in the data, whether it's women, persons with disability, young people, informal workers, or unpaid caregivers, and all that. We cannot address all these inequalities that if we don't measure, we cannot address these inequalities. And it's a good start that we've done, that as countries we are here and we are learning from each other. I must say no country has it all, and this continuous peer-to-peer learning sessions will go a long way to enrich our various work that we do, more especially in the inclusive data space. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilo.
Okay, thank you. So in our case, our policy has the main objective of becoming, of transitioning towards a society of care. And my call to action would be inviting all of the countries to start thinking, how can we do that? And I think in our case, we would strongly recommend start with bigger investments in national statistical systems in order to have the possibility to produce more broad information, more disaggregated, more inclusive information, and to also give account of the role of care in protecting and sustaining all forms of life. So, thank you.
Thank you, Katja.
My call for action, I would say, invest in measuring what matters, not only what is easy to measure. And data must lead to action, not just reports.
Wonderful. And finally, Kanabel.
Oh, I thought you had spared me from
No, you're our brand.
I think for me, what I'd like to say is that, you know, where women and girls are missing data, then they become invisible. So at any given time, just to follow on what she was talking about, the issues around the living now and ensure that the data is properly disaggregated to ensure that all the vulnerable and marginalized segments of the population are taken into consideration, and also, of course, by doing lots of intersectional analysis, because you will find that women are unique even in their own diversity. You'll find the younger women, their needs are quite varied compared to the older women, and also, you know, the middle-aged women and all that. And again, also, when you look at other populations, even among the women themselves, like some of them who are persons with disability and all that. So for me, my rallying call always is that where data is missing, women and girls are invisible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm not going to wind up by repeating what our panelists have said. I just want to ask the audience just to find out if we achieved what we were supposed to do today. And by asking you this question, I'll just want you to respond with a yes or a C for the sake of Camilo. So our session today was supposed to help us understand the Women Economic Empowerment Index. Were you able to understand it better? You're too silent. We are winding up. Were you able to understand it better? Wonderful. We were also supposed to learn more about the time use surveys, and we've heard from Colombia and Kenya, and you've seen the passion in which they've spoken. Are you coming out of here more knowledgeable? Then lastly, we have heard so much about unpaid care data, and we have been told how it builds up to shaping national policy, and we believe that it is possible for us also to implement it. Are we committing that as we go back to our various countries and our various organizations, that we are going to be pioneers in speaking about this? So thank you so much. So I want us to end there, and I want us to appreciate our panelists and yourselves using an inclusive clap. Wait for instructions. So the inclusive clap is basically where you do this, then, okay, that was practice. Now let's appreciate. Let's go. Angusha. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best as you continue with the Data Festival, and we hope to meet in other sessions. Thank you. Have a nice evening.